Imagine this. You're living in a picturesque neighborhood, the kind with tree-lined streets, quiet neighbors, and peaceful homes. You're going about your life, completely unaware that one of the most horrifying events in American crime history is unfolding just down the street. A family has been murdered in their own home. 6 people, all shot dead in their beds. And the killer? It's one of their own. But that's not the end of the story. The house where these brutal murders took place would go on to be the setting for one of the most infamous hauntings in history. Paranormal claims so intense that it forced the next family who lived there to flee after just 28 days. This is the story of the DeFeo murders, a real-life tragedy that inspired the infamous Amityville Horror legend. We'll take you through the dark details of that fateful night in 1974, dive into the mind of the killer, explore the strange events that unfolded afterward, and unpack the haunting claims that have captivated people for decades. So, sit tight, because this story is more terrifying than any horror movie you've ever seen, and it's all real. To understand the crime, we first need to understand the people who lived at 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York, the DeFeo family. They seemed like a typical suburban family from the outside, but behind closed doors, tensions were high. Ronald DeFeo Sr. was the head of the household. Known as Big Ronnie, he was strict, domineering, and had a temper that could explode at any moment. He was a successful businessman, but his reputation as a controlling and often violent father overshadowed that. Louise, his wife, was more passive. She took a back seat in family matters and focused on raising their 5 children: Ronald Jr., or Butch as he was called, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John. Butch DeFeo, the oldest of the DeFeo children, was seen as the problem child. As the firstborn, he bore the brunt of his father's wrath. The pressure to live up to Big Ronnie's expectations weighed heavily on him, and as Butch grew older, his relationship with his father became increasingly volatile. From an early age, Butch showed signs of trouble. He was prone to outbursts, struggled in school, and eventually turned to drugs and alcohol as a way to cope with the dysfunction at home. He experimented with LSD and heroin and often got into trouble with the law. Despite these problems, the family continued to support him financially. Butch worked at the family's car dealership, though he often skipped work and relied on his parents for money. It's clear that Butch was spiraling, and the tension within the family was reaching a boiling point. Everything came to a head in the early hours of November 13, 1974. That night, while his family slept, Butch DeFeo grabbed a .35 caliber Marlin rifle and set out to do the unthinkable. He began by entering his parents' bedroom. Without hesitation, he shot his father twice in the back as he lay in bed, killing him instantly. The noise from the gunshots was loud, so loud that it should have woken the entire household, but somehow, no one stirred. Butch then turned the gun on his mother, Louise, who was still lying in bed. She was shot twice, dying from her injuries immediately. But Butch didn't stop there. He made his way to his younger brother's shared bedroom. Mark, who was 12, and John, who was just 9, were asleep when Butch shot them both at close range. Neither boy had a chance to wake up or defend themselves. Next, Butch entered the room where his 2 sisters, 18-year-old Dawn and 13-year-old Allison, were sleeping. He shot Allison in the face, and Dawn was killed with a single gunshot to the head. In a matter of minutes, Butch had wiped out his entire family. 6 people, his father, mother, 2 brothers, and 2 sisters, were dead, shot as they slept in their beds. The murders were methodical, chilling in their precision. But even after committing these horrific acts, Butch didn't flee. Instead, he showered, changed his clothes, and went to work as though nothing had happened. Later that day, Butch made a series of calculated moves to stage his discovery of the murders. After work, he went to a local bar and told people he hadn't been able to reach his family all day. Concerned, he gathered a group of friends and went back to the house on Ocean Avenue. Once inside, Butch feigned shock and horror as he discovered the bodies of his family members. Butch quickly called the police, claiming that his family had been murdered by someone else, possibly a hitman. When the police arrived, they were confronted with the gruesome crime scene. 6 bodies, each shot at close range, all still lying in their beds. At first, Butch stuck to his story that the murders were the work of a mob hit. He claimed that his father had connections to the mafia and that his family had been targeted. But as the investigation progressed, the police started to see through his lies. There were no signs of a break-in, and inconsistencies in Butch's story began to emerge. The pressure mounted, and eventually Butch broke down. He confessed to the murders, telling police, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." With that confession, the investigation took a dark turn. Butch DeFeo had not only killed his family, but had coldly attempted to cover up his crime and blame someone else. But why would someone kill their entire family? That's the question that has haunted investigators, psychologists, and true crime enthusiasts for decades. Butch DeFeo's defense team argued that he was insane at the time of the murders, claiming that he heard voices telling him to kill his family. They pointed to his history of drug abuse, his strained relationship with his father, and his mental health struggles as contributing factors. But the prosecution painted a different picture. They argued that Butch was a violent, unstable young man who was tired of being controlled by his father and wanted to claim his family's life insurance money. In the days leading up to the murders, Butch had been growing increasingly frustrated with his financial dependence on his parents. He had even stolen money from them on multiple occasions. Ultimately, the jury didn't buy the insanity defense. They found Butch DeFeo guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms in prison, where he remained until his death in 2021. Just when you think the story couldn't get any darker, it does. About a year after the murders, the house at 112 Ocean Avenue was sold to a new family, the Lutzes. George and Kathy Lutz, along with their 3 children, thought they were getting a great deal on the house. After all, it was a large, beautiful Dutch colonial home with a view of the Amityville River. But it came with a dark history and a much darker presence. The Lutz family moved in on December 18, 1975. Almost immediately, strange things began to happen. George Lutz reported waking up every night at exactly 3:15 a.m., the same time the DeFeo murders were believed to have taken place. He said he would feel an overwhelming sense of dread and hear strange noises throughout the house. Kathy Lutz also experienced terrifying events. She claimed to have seen green slime oozing from the walls and smelled foul odors that seemed to come from nowhere. She reported feeling a strange sensation as though she were being touched or pushed by an invisible force. At one point, she said she even levitated above her bed while sleeping. Their children weren't immune to the horror either. They spoke of seeing shadowy figures, hearing disembodied voices, and having their beds shake violently in the middle of the night. But perhaps the most terrifying claim came from George Lutz himself. He said that one night, while walking through the house, he saw a pair of glowing red eyes staring at him through a window. According to George, these weren't human eyes. They belonged to something far more sinister. The family was so terrified that they brought in a priest to bless the house. However, the priest reportedly fled in fear after hearing a voice command him to get out. The Lutzes lasted only 28 days in the house before fleeing in the middle of the night, leaving all their belongings behind. The Lutz family's story quickly gained media attention. In 1977, author Jay Anson published The Amityville Horror, a book that chronicled the supernatural experiences of the Lutz family in vivid detail. The book became a bestseller, and it wasn't long before Hollywood came knocking. In 1979, the first Amityville Horror movie was released, bringing the terrifying tale to an even wider audience. The film was a box office hit, and it spawned countless sequels, remakes, and spin-offs, cementing the Amityville Horror as one of the most famous haunted house stories of all time. But despite its popularity, there has always been skepticism surrounding the Lutz family's claims. Some believe that the entire haunting was a hoax, designed to cash in on the notoriety of the DeFeo murders. Others insist that something truly paranormal was happening inside 112 Ocean Avenue. The truth? Well, it depends on who you ask. So, was the house on Ocean Avenue truly haunted? Or was the Lutz family's story an elaborate fabrication? We may never know for sure. What we do know is that the DeFeo murders were a real, brutal tragedy, and 6 innocent lives were taken in the dead of night by someone they trusted. The fear that the Amityville Horror stirs up comes from something deeply human, the terror of violence that can strike in the place we should feel safest, our own homes. Whether you believe in the paranormal or not, there's no denying the chilling nature of this story, one that has captured the imaginations of people for decades. As for the house itself, 112 Ocean Avenue still stands, though its infamous address has been changed. Over the years, many families have lived there, and none have reported any paranormal activity. But the legend of the Amityville Horror lives on, a reminder that sometimes the scariest stories come from real-life tragedies. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as chilling as we did, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more true crime and supernatural tales. Let us know in the comments. Do you think the Amityville house was haunted, or was it all a hoax? Stay safe out there, and remember, sometimes the most terrifying stories come from the darkest corners of reality.